Okay, today is purchase sale agreements, everybody. Now, for teaching purposes, this is the main one of the main screens of the Northwest MLS. So I like to work or not work. I like to teach through Express Forms. I want you to always use Transaction Desk. Don't start a form in Express Forms, download it to computer, and upload it to Transaction Desk for signing. Just start in Transaction Desk for everything. Now, purchase sale agreements, we've got multiple ones based on your client's purchase. And you can search all kinds of forms, which are great. You're going to get all kinds of information in here when you type in purchase and sale. Notice that some of these have what I call a manual on the right-hand side. So let's look for, these are actually listing forms. So let's go down to start with multifamily. So multifamily, notice that there's a manual for multifamily. I like the manuals because the first thing it tells you is why would you use this form, right? So this form should be used for the sale of a multifamily building between 2 and 5 units. Any more than 5 units and you're going to be in commercial. Okay, so 6 or more, you're going to use commercial and investment purchase sale agreements, which they have here in the Northwest MLS. It's more of a complicated form. And when you get into commercial, things start to change a little bit. There's more of handshakes, less signings, can get a little scary if you've never done it. So I do recommend you either refer commercial off to somebody else or you partner if they will allow you to partner. What else this part of the manual does is it will take you all the way to the actual purchase and sale agreement. And then it will give you numbers as to the numbers that are listed above in the manual on what you fill in. So with multifamily, you're going to fill in very common things that you do on any purchase sale agreement. The date that you're writing the contract. If there is an MLS number, you're going to put the MLS number there. And your offer expiration date, if you want one. If you don't put an offer expiration date on any purchase and sale agreement, it automatically expires within 2 business days. The buyer's name, if there's one or more, you put them both there. The status, are they taking this as a married couple, an unmarried couple as their personal property, or married purchase their separate estate, LLC, corp, whatever the status is. This helps title to tell them how they're going to be vesting in title. So if you don't put this in here, then you're going to need to tell title and escrow how your client is vesting in title so that they don't screw up the report. You can have more than one property ID number on any given purchase and sale agreement. You will notice that it says legal description attached as Exhibit A. That's these. So these 4 lines so far get very consistent with any purchase and sale agreement. That means when you get down to what we call the addenda line, line 18. Now, some of these lines move based on the purchase and sale agreement because some have a little bit more in here than they do on some other forms. Like condominiums will have extra place, vacant land will have extra space, those types of things. I love it when people call me and they know I'm teaching. That's my favorite. They could also be telling me that I need to admit people because I can't see them. Hold on. That's exactly what's probably she's doing. So there, I've just added them. Okay. It's okay. It's one of those days. Okay. So you do not need to write legal description down here on the addenda line. The addenda line is there for you to have a roadmap on the addendas that are attached to your purchase and sale agreement. If I put form 35, which is the inspection form on this line, but I do not attach 35, then it doesn't exist. So this is just telling everybody in the world that these addendas that are attached here or labeled here should be attached to the contract. But if they're not attached, then you have a problem. And Houston's not going to help you. Included items are items that you see in the house, right? So when you're walking through the house, let's say it's vacant, and you see the stove arranged, you see there is a refrigerator, washer and dryer don't seem to be there, dishwasher is there, but you try to check washer and dryer, even though it's not physically in the property, it doesn't mean the seller has to add it. It just means you made a mistake in drafting your contract. You can't check something that doesn't exist and expect it to get added. And another thing is if the seller is going to add a washer and dryer, you still wouldn't check these boxes. You are going to put it on an addendum form 34 that the seller is to put washers and dryers and whatever the situation is. Again, very specific color, model number, make sure it's brand new, those types of things. Purchase price is the price that the buyer is offering. Earnest money is the amount that they are going to put as their good faith estimate to the buyer, to the seller, saying, if I breach the contract, I'm going to give you this money. So it behooves us as buyer brokers to make sure that it's a lower amount than a higher amount. Now, earnest money cannot exceed 5% of the purchase price. The seller can only retain, let's say it's a 10% purchase price earnest money. Seller can only retain 5% of it. And that's part of the boilerplate of the contract. And then it has to be delivered to the closing agent. We don't have a trust account, so we can't hold the money. It's not allowed. Forfeiture versus seller's election of remedies. Forfeiture is buyer friendly. Seller's election of remedies is seller friendly. Seller's election says the seller can keep the earnest money and sue the buyer. So we love forfeiture of earnest money if our buyer is going to be a little wonky and decide to walk at the last minute for no reason. Title insurance company. This is the company that's going to insure the legal description, the title company. And usually the seller's agent will have put in agent remarks who they want to use because they've already pulled the title report, prelim as it's called, because they also need a copy of the legal. When you list a property in the Northwest MLS, there's 2 requirements that you have to attach in the listing. One is the legal description in supplements and labeled as a legal description and tagged as a legal description. And you have to supply 1 photo of the property. Those are the bare minimums in order to list a property, as well as the rest of the listing input form that has a little dot next to it. The escrow company or closing agent, that could be who you choose. Usually our buyers have no clue who title is or an escrow company. Sometimes they're the same company. Sometimes they're different. If the seller picks First American title, maybe you want to pick Ages Escrow. So that is something you can pick because nothing has happened in the closing department until a purchase sale agreement is mutually agreed upon and delivered to them. So you can pick whoever you want. If you don't know any of them and the listing agent has put who they would prefer, put that company in, and hopefully they've given you an individual's name and you can put that individual on that same line. The closing date is the day that it's going to close. And when you're doing these forms in transaction desk, that will be a pull down menu because you want to make sure that you don't pick a weekend. It always strikes me so odd that people have closing dates on weekends and holidays. The pull down menu won't let you pick anything that's grayed out. So that's your safest bet.
Jeannie, I'm sorry. We can't see the screen.
Oh my goodness. You're just now telling me?
I was trying to figure it out.
I was trying.
How new am I? I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
How about that? What?
Yes, better. Thank you.
Perfect.
You see it.
Perfect. And there's how many chats? Wow, look at that. Yes, it's time. Okay, thank you. All the things. Great. Okay. Did I miss anything? Hopefully not. Let's see if I missed any people. Let me close that out. I don't think, oh, there we go. Okay, I think I've answered any questions. Anybody have any questions or anything else I need to know before we continue? So here's your screen. This will help you a little bit more. Luckily, it is recorded, so the recorded screen will actually help you as well if you need to go back and refer to this. Okay, possession date. Possession date can end on a weekend. Many times we will close on a Friday and possession will be the next day, so it gives the seller time to get their belongings out of the property, or it can be the same day, or it could be days down the road if the seller is going to do what we call a rent back from the buyer. So they become a tenant, the seller becomes a tenant, the buyer becomes a landlord, and you will utilize Form 65B for that. Many people do not move out of their homes when they list it. So that possession date, and you as buyer brokers, I recommend you always check possession date. Unless you're in a multiple offer situation, in agent remarks, it says we need a rent back. Buyer needs to understand the ginormous risk about that. And my worst story is seller's a real estate agent living in their own home, does a rent back, doesn't move out on time. And that's a real estate agent. And the only way you can get a tenant out at this point, it will be through an eviction. So it's very scary for our buyers to allow a rent back. So as an example, when I go to move someday, I am going to move out of my house with my belongings and my dog. Maybe not even all my belongings. I'm probably going to sell everything in my house and then move out because I'm going to move across the country when I retire. And I don't want to take any of my stuff with me. I don't know if it'll fit in a new place that I don't know where I'm going. So I will open my house up. I will put a bunch of Venmo stickers on everything. Okay, if you want this, pay me, right? Take it out the door. Tell me when you're going to pick it up. Get everything out of the house. I move out. Then all the people come in to do the painting, the repairs. Then it gets staged, then it gets photographed, and then it goes up for sale. Like that is my ideal world that I wish we could all live in. Not everybody can, as I know that to be true, being in the business for 31 years. So, but that is my favorite, just so you know. If you ever want to know what my favorite is, that's one of them. So it could be possession date, may not be on closing, it might be other. So you would check the other box and you would use Form 65B and you would say see Form 65B, or you would put the physical date and you'd still have 65B attached. You still need the 65B, even if you put a date in there that's 1 day later, 2 days later, because you need the protection of the post-closing rent back for insurance purposes, hopefully an avenue to get the seller out if they decide to stay 4 days instead of 2, those types of scenarios. Now, when I say specific term, I'm referring to the numbers that are on the left-hand side, not in red, but in black. So when I say specific term 12 next to the 19 in red, so this is the specific term numbers. So specific term, service of a closing agent for payment of utilities. I actually talked about this in sales meetings yesterday, where a situation where the buyer moves in and they get their first water bill, no, sewer bill is what it was, and it was over $3,000. And they're like, I've only lived here for 2 days. Why do I have a $3,000 sewer bill? Because Form 22K, which is identifying the lienable utilities against a property, not a person, has to be filled out by one or both parties, meaning that one form is going to be filled out, and whoever fills it out, preferably the seller, because the seller's the one who pays the bills. They know what the utilities are. They fill it out in full. But if they don't, it's our responsibilities as buyer brokers to fill that out. Because if it's not filled out, but we send one to escrow with our offer and it's signed around but blank, escrow has no instructions on who the utility companies are, which they could look it up just like we can, but that is not their job. Their job is to follow instructions that we give them. One of them is this form with instructions to call the lienable utilities, get payoff amounts, and then do a holdback from the seller of 1.5 amount. And then they pay the utility bill, then they send the leftovers back to the seller. And then that will cause no issues of all of a sudden a $3,000 bill getting delivered to the buyer after they've moved in. Or you can choose to waive the opportunity for escrow to do this. It does not cost any extra money. If the seller does not provide one in supplements that you can attach to your agreement, send a blank one, ask them to fill it out. If they don't, you fill it out within a number of days. 5 days or less is what I recommend. And you send another copy of it completed, both to escrow, to the seller side, to our listing firm, to our buyer firm. So you send it to all parties. Specific term 13 is a big one that people get trapped in, especially in condominiums. So specific term 13 says that any assessments or charges that are levied today, closing, let's say closing is August 30th. Let's say it's not a weekend. I have no idea what day it is. They're levied today, August 5th, but they're not due until December 1st, 2026. Who is going to pay it? Is the buyer going to assume the charge, or is the seller going to pay it? So again, it has to be levied before closing, but it's not due until after closing. And so in a condominium, when it's levied, usually it means they've talked about it in board meetings, they've talked about it in the minutes, there's financial information about it. And a great example is reserve studies are low. 5 of the buildings need a new roof or windows or siding or paint, or reserve study not being high enough. Now I have to assess every owner in the unit of buildings 1 through 5, A through D, whatever the situation is, $5,000. Okay, so that means that it's levied today because we talked about it. We put it in the board meetings. We're telling you that it's levied today, but it's not due until December. That's when we're going to start hiring people, which would be an odd time to do roofing, siding, painting, or the other. But let's say it's reverse winter to summer, right? So that's what that means. So who is going to pay that? In single family is where people don't think about this. If the home is less than 15 years old, there is a high likelihood that there is a sewer capacity charge. King County assesses every sewer line that gets put in. So the land is sold, the developer comes in, the developer puts in the sewer lines to attach to the sewer that's in the streets. They take that cost, they give it back to the builder. Builder then, after they've paid that off, They have now then assessed it against you. So maybe it's just the buck that keeps getting passed. So sewer goes in by the developer, builder takes that and tells King County, and this will go for both Snohomish and Pierce, because King County gets a brunt of everything through it. So depending on the line in Snohomish and the line in Pierce, it could come into King County. They then pass it on to the buyer. It's roughly a $20,000 charge that runs for 15 years. So a house that's less than 15 years old will have some remnants left over of that bill. I only buy new construction, so I have paid off 3 sewer capacity charges or pass them on to the next person. So if I put that it is assumed by buyer, buyer's going to assume it before you agree, before your client signs this, tell them to do their due diligence. The house is only 10 years old. There's 5 years left. Usually, like I said, it's roughly a $20,000. My guess is today, since I have lived in my house for 21 years, it's probably higher than what I did 20 years ago based on just economy. It usually is allowed to be billed quarterly. And back then that's roughly, $240 a quarter for every quarter for the next 15 years as an example. So it's not a big expense. You can pay it off early and avoid some of the charges. Not really worth it. Or do you want to have the seller pay it off before we close? So escrow would do a holdback for that as well, if that's prepaid in full by seller, and they'll pay off that capacity charge and then it's done.
Where do you find it?
King County. So I would just go into King County utilities, or you could even type in to use the Google machine, do King County sewer capacity charge costs.
And then type in an address or something.
Well, it's any house that is under 15 years will have one. It's just a matter of it got paid off along the way or not. But every house that is 15 years or younger had one at some point. And escrow could probably help you too before you get too far. Seller also has to disclose it in Form 17 if there is one. So if they say no, dig deeper before you get mutual, or at least before you get through your contingencies of inspection, or if you have title. Financing won't help you because they won't delay financing. They won't fail financing because of a sewer capacity charge. Specific term 14, seller citizenship. The seller has to disclose, which they will do so in the listing. So you're welcome to check this box based on what the listing tells you. Are they a foreign person for taxation purposes? Meaning that they owe now an income tax for the sale of their property. If they are, then escrow will hold back money and pay off the IRS. This is not a fail-safe test by checking one of these boxes. You need to confirm with escrow that the seller has given them Form 22E FIRPTA to disclose that and certify they are or are not a foreign person. If when it's uploaded into supplements, then you can go ahead and grab that and send a copy to escrow so they have it.
Do you put that in addendum?
In addendum? No, FIRPTA. So FIRPTA, that's a great question. Do we put it on specific term 18 addenda line? No, we do not. When you do this in transaction desk, the addenda line will let you pull down the forms you will attach. FIRPTA will not be on there. Legal will not be on there. 65B will not be on there because it is a separate agreement technically. Legal and Form 17 100% will not be on there. So those are 4 for sures that are not on there. 22J, which is also a disclosure form for lead-based paint, that will be on there. But FIRPTA is not. Do not put anything on there of those 4 I just spoke about. 65B, 17, Form 17, 22E, and legal. Legal already says it's attached. And notice when I said it says attached as Exhibit A, if somebody is using a quitclaim deed, Exhibit A will not be at the top. So it's our job to add a watermark up there that says attached, or it says Exhibit A, because that is how it's referenced all through this contract. It's a technicality, but it's one that could trip us up somewhere along the line. Verification of information. So I had a phone call a month or 2 ago from a broker in one of our offices. And she said, we just had the appraisal. The appraiser said that the house is smaller by 300 square feet. The buyer had an inclination that maybe the house was smaller and told the appraiser, please be sure to measure because I have a feeling the house is small. It just feels smaller. Well, years ago, the builder had put the square footage in, including the garage, which is 300 square feet. So this buyer wanted to reassess the purchase price. I want to offer them $200,000 less. Now, a house, when you walk into a home, you see what you're getting, and they did it felt smaller. And if you did comps on this house, it was not $200,000 less. This house was updated to the premiums. So when you talk about, so that's why we don't use price per square foot, because this house A and this house B look exactly the same. When you walk in the front door, then all of a sudden when you get into the house, A looks like $1 million. B looks like they're from the 1960s. They will not appraise the same, even though they look the same and they're the same square footage. This house has more value because it's been updated. It's been painted, carpet, stainless steel, not avocado green, shag red carpet, and all of the fun things that we had back in the 60s and 70s. So the first question I asked the broker was, how many more days do you have based on specific term 15 information verification period? The broker said, we waived it. I'm like, why did you waive it? Were you in multiple offers? No. Okay. Did the buyer say, I don't want it? No, they actually asked me, how come it's waived? So I'm going to go back to my question, broker. Why was it waived? Because that's what I've always done based on what somebody else taught me. This is why you come to these classes. You will talk to many brokers in our offices, and they're going to give you their opinions. They're going to give you their practices. And I'm going to tell you, I see things in black and white in a square, very, very defined lines. Brokers see things in a circle with gray. The lines go out like this because there's nothing stopping it. Okay. So everything is blurred. So when in doubt, if you really want to know how to fill out a contract, I will ask you specific questions to make sure that you fill it out correctly. Now, if you're in a multiple offer situation and you've given all of the risk to your buyer and they want to take no risk, so they want to have it tightened up as much as they can with contingencies, they may not win. And those are the things we'll discuss. But it's also our job with our buyers to tell them all of the risks. I don't know who I talked to earlier, but I said, this is what you're going to do. You are going to tell them the risk it was a company that was selling a house that required on the financing addendum that the buyer's time period automatically waives. So their financing contingency waived in 21 days unless they failed financing prior to the 21 days. Huge risk for a buyer because they could lose their job on day 22 before closing and they will lose their earnest money, right? So buyers don't like to give up that contingency. That was the first thing this company required. The second, and it was a bid home. You had to bid on the home. So of course the contingencies are going to be super low. And I said, this is what I want you to do. You're verbally going to tell your buyer these risks, X, Y, and Z. You're going to then email them these risks based on our conversation, X, Y, Z. You're going to grab the buyer advisory packet out of our disclosure packet and highlight the areas where those risks apply and attach it to that email. The other thing I recommended, which you might all want to think about, is what's the word? Not hire, but subscribe to a meeting recording app. One of the ones that came out a few years ago was Otter. Now, anytime you're going to use that, I would, of course, start the conversation on the phone. I want to let you know that my note-taking system is recording our conversation. At the end of our phone call, I'm going to send you an email what we talked about. Attached will also be the recorded notes so that you have them. There is so much that we have to do to protect ourselves today that it's hugely important that we use as many avenues as we can. There's a new one that's called Pocket where you can attach it to the back of your phone and it records the meeting minutes. AI will do it. I believe Zoom does it. I've never actually looked at any of my recordings. Today's is going to probably look really funny since everybody's raising their hand and telling me I'm not even sharing my screen. So who never knows. But there are some safety nets that we can take to really help us. There was a few years ago where we got sued. And one of the things the buyer said, and this was probably 15 years ago, something the buyer said was, well, she never gave me the law of agency. And I'm like, how do you know what it's called if she never gave it to you? And then she went through like 5 attorneys, and finally the 5th attorney was suing me for dental work. And I'm like, we're a real estate firm, not a dental firm. He's like, oh. I'm like, yeah, she was a perpetual suer for everybody. So protecting ourselves a little bit. We are very litigious right now in our states, and with everything that's happening, there's just so much that we need to be careful with, which is super scary. That's why retirement is looking better and better every day for me. And luckily I'm closer to that versus when I started in my 20s. Okay, so I recommend you never waive that for any reason. If anything, and if you're a listing broker, have it run the same amount of time period as your inspection. That should give them enough period of time. So what that would have done would have been to verify that the information the seller is giving this buyer, the square footage is 1,800 when in fact it's 1,500, and this would have been an out for them. Luckily, the seller had not filled out Form 17 all the way. So one thing I'll always ask you next is Form 17 complete? How many lines did you sign on Form 17, buyer? I try to find as many outs as I can. That is not our job. Our job is not to find outs by any means. But at the same time, when we're seeing $200,000 eye-to-eye difference, we needed to get out of the contract. And we did, legally. Agency disclosure. You are going to represent a buyer or a seller, or you are going to represent both parties as a limited dual agent. Whichever agreement you have signed, if you are a limited dual agent, then you are going to check both those boxes, because remember, if you have a listing agreement that trumps a buyer agreement, if you have no listing agreement, we automatically represent the buyer with no agreement at all, just so you know. The only thing that protects us from that is having a listing agreement. In the state of Washington from 1996 on, the law changed about agency that says we automatically represent a buyer if we do not have a listing agreement, even if we don't have a buyer agreement. The one thing you will never check on this line, 16, is unrepresented and unrepresented. You cannot not represent a person. You have to represent one side, period. You're not an attorney. You can't just start writing contracts for the fun of it and get paid. That is against the law, and we would get sued for malpractice. So you've got to watch that very carefully. Now, specific term 17, which this will change on the vacant land. It'll become Form 19, or maybe it's condo, which we will look at here in a minute. Line A, which is 25A. This would technically be 25B, okay? But specific term 17. Both of these have to be filled in. Let me rephrase that. B absolutely has to be filled in or you will not get paid. A could be blank, because maybe you are offering on a property that is east of the mountains where they cannot disclose what the seller is offering to pay on behalf of the buyer. So 17A says seller is offering, basically goes like this. Hi, buyer, I am offering your brokerage 2.5% so you don't have to pay them. I don't know what your buyer agreement says yet, and that will come out, of course, with line B. Line B says, hey, seller, I owe my broker 3% based on my buyer agreement. I want you to pay 3%. So they could be different, right? That's fine. As long as this says 3 and it's signed around, the buyer does not have to pay and the brokerage gets 3%.
Question.
Yes.
Does B have to match the buyer's agent?
Does B have to match the BBSA, the buyer broker service agreement, Form 41?
Yeah.
Yes and no. Now I'm going to tell you the no answer first. No, it does not, because let's say seller says in A 2.5%. Buyer agreement says 3%. Buyer said, I don't want you to ask for that. I will pay you the difference. So then you would put 2.5% here. You would then fill out another form that says buyer is now paying 0.5%. That's the no answer. The yes answer is, let's say this says 2.5. Let's say your buyer agreement says 2.5. You can't put 3 here. You have to put 2.5.
But what if you're on the list side and you don't know what the BB, like?
You
if they're
never
asking-
have to know
okay.
what the BBSA says.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter on the listing side. What matters is whatever number is here. Let's say it does not match A. You, listing broker, need to make sure that your seller understands that if we don't counter, they are paying this.
Yeah.
Now, let's say that happened. Let's say my buyer agreement says 3%. This says 2.5. On B, it says 3. Seller says, nope, I think I'm being generous enough. Go get 0.5% from your client. I'm countering you. Now, you go to your buyer, you're on the hook for 0.5%. Buyer says, you know what, Genine, you showed me 2 houses and we've been together for 5 seconds. Any way that you can not charge me 0.5% and come down to what the seller's offering? You know what? Yes, buyer, I can do that. Before you sign this agreement, you and I are going to amend our buyer agreement with Form 41A, an amendment to the buyer broker, I don't know what it's called, BBSA, buyer broker service agreement, down to 2.5. So those are all of the scenarios, except for, why is there a little box right here that says addendum for credit? So my buyer agreement says 2%. I write 2 on B. Seller says, well, I'm offering you 2.5. So there's 0.5% overage. There's only 2 people that can get the overage. The buyer, or the seller doesn't have to pay it and they get to keep it. So if the buyer gets it, you're going to check this box. And on that page, which is 41C for basically buyer brokerage service compensation credit, and you're going to put the overage is going to my buyer. So there's every scenario under the sun. Now, again, if you're going to go to other MLS systems, this will not be filled in because they are not allowed to disclose it based on NAR rules and regulations. And then, of course, everybody signs this and make sure that you are using transaction desk because everything about you gets filled in fabulously. When you send the offer over to the listing broker, you are going to send it based on the listing broker's email address. You are also going to send it to the email address that's here, the firm's document email, and the firm document email, which is us. So it's going to be KW, whatever office you're in, at benkinney.com. So KW Seattle at benkinney.com, KW Eastside, KW Tacoma, KW North Seattle at benkinney.com. I highly recommend as a great practice that when you email an offer and any other notices after the offer is mutually accepted, an example 35R, whatever, you're sending additional addendum, you email it to 4 locations. Those 4 locations are on this front page. Your email address, listing broker, buyer broker, whichever one you're opposite side of, and both of the firms. That way it comes into your email box, in your email system, create a folder on the side, Gmail, Outlook, whatever you use. And you move those emails over when you're done dealing with it into that label. So at the end of the transaction, they're in one area, you go capture it, and that's how you're able to load your emails into Command as required by the state of Washington. Now, the best part about that is you're only filling in that page, and this form is done. What's critical is you have to know what all these paragraphs mean. Now I can tell you, and I refer to this in meetings all the time, page 2, paragraph A, purchase price. Buyer, you have to understand the amount of money that we're talking about today, you have to disclose where it's coming from. Every single penny. So purchase price, where is it coming from? Well, that's a great question, Genine. I am getting a loan. Okay, there's my first thing. Great. How much of that is the loan versus the cash? Well, I'm going to put $100,000 down. Okay, so that's accounted for. So we've got, let's say it's $500,000. We've got $400,000 in a loan and $100,000 in down payment. Okay, there's still going to be a little bit more money out there because you're going to have closing costs. That's not going to be wrapped into your $100,000 down payment. There's the down payment and then there's closing costs. And your lender will tell you what all of that is going to look like based on your purchase price. So then they come back to me. Well, actually, and when they say, well, it's $100,000 cash. Oh, great. Okay, where is that cash? Oh, great question. Well, $50,000 is coming from my mom and $50,000 is coming from future earnings in my Microsoft stock. Whoa. Now those are contingent funds. Okay, the loan is a contingent fund, which we're going to disclose on Form 22A financing. But the gifts and the future earnings, those are contingent funds. And you'll notice that this says that the buyer represents they have sufficient funds to close and they will not be contingent unless otherwise disclosed. So paragraph A is the one that you should have in front of you at a buyer agreement. You're going to go over the disclosure packet. You're going to go over your buyer agreement. You're actually probably going to go over a sample of what this offer is going to look like. So they have an idea in case you have to pull over on the side of the road, get out of your car, close the back of your hatchback, get your computer out, hotspot in, and write an offer in 5 minutes because you're in a multiple offer situation. Obviously, this has happened before because I talk about it very fast. So I've done it many, many times. Sometimes I would ride in the back of the car when my husband was driving, my son was in the front seat so that we could get to a baseball game, and I'm in the back working and writing offers. So hot spots are magical. Make sure that you're in an area that they have where you can get on your phone. But you should go over every single page that you're going to talk about. I can put this purchase agreement in front of anybody. You can see it. I'm ready to read it upside down, and I can tell you what every single paragraph justly means. Okay. You need to know that as well. I have read these forwards and backwards for years. So I know what all of these mean. Your job is to know the same. So if you don't know what half of this means, guess what you get to do tonight? You get to go home. You can pour whatever you want. It could be warm milk, sleepy time tea, maybe something stronger like bourbon or wine, up to you. Maybe a Diet Coke, it's fine. But you need to start knowing what this means. Okay.
I read it earlier today and it just so many words.
Mhm.
And like, so I get the gist of
The
it.
gist of it.
But you're trying to explain it to somebody is.
Well, and if I ever call you or you ever call me and you're asking me a question and I say, I want you to go to page X and I want you to go to line 41, I'm talking about the right-hand side, because then we'll talk about that. So included items comes up a lot because that is something that trips us up. The seller takes the curtains and leaves the curtain rod. Can't do that. Actually, this is a very good point. You stage the property. The seller has moved out. Your stager comes in. Oh, there's curtain rods. Great. I'm going to put up curtains. Destage the house before closing and take the curtains. And you did not exclude them from the contract. So that is a real life story where now we're buying somebody curtains, either the buyer or the staging company, right? So something to pay attention to is that people get caught up on things that are attached to the wall. Examples would be you're in the garage and there's those wonky particle board shelves that sit on a metal plate or metal bracket. What stays? That board isn't attached, but the brackets are. When in doubt, leave it and let them figure it out. What you can't leave, seller, is paint cans and little wood chips and these little widgets that every husband has in their garage. I might need to whittle something widget-wise in the house later. I cannot wait till that can go away in my house. Those things are real. Those widgets, whatever they're for, they are real. And they multiply. They multiply. So I'm not going to go over the boilerplate, but this is something that I want you take a paragraph once a week even and just internalize it. You know, quite honestly, do a screenshot of it, throw it in chat, Claude, whatever, and say, give me the biggest bullet points you can out of this paragraph. Okay. As an example. So that's multifamily, which is going to match very similar to the other ones. 21 is going to be your residential purchase and sale agreement. 21 you're going to use for single family purchases, non-condominiums. Now it can be used for townhomes because now townhomes is a thing that is considered single family. Back in the old days, condominium was what it was, and it was either a flat, style 30, or it was a townhouse, style 32. Well, 32 can still be used, even though it's supposed to be condominium, but maybe, so it really depends on how it is listed in the Northwest MLS, and any good listing agent will tell you, hey, you need to use form 28 or 21, 28 for condominiums, 21 for single family, depending on how, is it fee simple or is it not? Okay. And you're going to go through all of these same things. There is nothing on this front page that is different from multifamily, except the other one has multiple units allowed.
What does a dadu fall under?
It depends. It could be a condominium. It could be just part of the purchase. It really depends how it was built and sourced.
It could be like a totally separate, like single.
It
family.
could be a condominium.
Oh, because they usually pay like an HOA.
Yeah. So whoever built all of that, and there's one, I have my friend's duplex listed, and that's exactly what they're going to do to it. That's what they did exactly 2 doors down. They took the existing structure, but they took it from being an original duplex to a single family home. Then they added a dadu in the back, and so now that's condominiumized, and now they have an HOA and all of that, and it lives in the back. It has a separate entrance, driving, and so forth. So yeah. So this is not much different than what we just looked at for multifamily. So it will look exactly the same. There will be probably some boilerplate language that will change. So again, you will rarely live in multifamily. Always start with form 21 and 28. 25 is going to be your vacant land that you might want to practice later on down the road. Again, when you get into vacant land, there's so much a buyer has to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about what the differences are. So 21 again is very similar. If we get to 23, it's a good one, manufactured home on leased land. So this means we are in a mobile home park. So what's going to be different here will be some manufactured information. Hopefully this has been disclosed by the listing broker. Month-to-month rent, and what does it include, right? Included items are still going to be your appliances, purchase price still the same, earnest money, all of that. Closing agent, do not pick your closing agent until you verify they know how to close a manufactured home. You will notice there is no title company. And why is there no title company? Because what does a title company do?
Make sure the house is has a marketable title.
Right? But so title insurance insures something. What do they insure? The legal description. On leased land, you don't have a legal description. So if you use Form 21 for a leased land manufactured home, now you will use a Form 21 for a non-leased land. So fee simple owned land, you will use a 21 for manufactured homes. But if you use a 21 in a manufactured home park and the buyer wants to get out, they will have every right to do so, because the one thing a seller cannot do is offer marketable title, because there isn't title, because it's a manufactured home on leased land with no legal. I'm going to pretend I can read this. Is that personal property? It is personal property. It's considered a vehicle. So it's very similar to how you would sell a car in essence. But luckily they give us this avenue to be able to do so, because we can't sell cars necessarily with a real estate license otherwise. So you will have a closing company. You will not have a title company. You can still have utilities that a buyer is going to, or excuse me, a seller is going to be responsible for. A buyer is going to inherit. Sometimes that is wrapped up into the monthly payment of their rent, sometimes not. So not a bill, no, not a bill of sale. We are using a residential purchase and sale agreement, not a bill of sale. Correct. Rules and regulations. So making sure that they've got time to approve or disapprove those. The leasing rental agreement contingent on buyer's disapproval. Approval of buyer. So contingent on the mobile home parks to approve the buyer to move in. So be very careful. A lot of manufactured home parks are 55 plus. That means there's no children allowed, or nobody under the age of 55 can buy it. There are some 55 plus where as long as one of the buyers is 55 plus, the other buyer can be maybe 53. So there are some nuances. But again, you want to make sure that the buyer understands they have to get approval by the park. If they don't get approved, they're not moving in. So don't go getting rid of your rental just yet until we've gotten through this. And make sure that you researched either in the listing or with the listing broker, how long does it take for this park to approve my buyer? So don't fill in 2 days if they're notorious for taking 2 weeks. Information verification, still the same clause. And who do you represent? Compensation is the same, still line 17, not 19, and then your addenda line. So those are the nuances and differences are going to be 12, 13, and 14. And of course, there's no title company. So they do put up here on leased land, so that because 21 is able to be used for manufactured homes, just not on leased land. 25 is your vacant land purchase and sale agreement. Okay, so this is going to be vacant land, meaning there's no structure on it. If there's a structure, maybe it's a shed, you're still going to use vacant land. And vacant land has a separate Form 17 seller disclosure form. Okay. Differences here will be specific term 14 and 15, and then that changes line 17 to specific term 18. But must it be subdivided before? So the property must be subdivided before X date or is not required to be subdivided. And feasibility either expires X number of days or satisfied and waived. Never satisfy and waive a feasibility study. We have no idea what land has or controls. There are companies out there that will physically help your buyer go through the whole process of feasibility. Feasibility should be no shorter than 30 days. I see a lot of 60 and 90 days. As an example, the duplex that my friend is selling, the feasibility study was 30, then it had a 60-day close. So the feasibility will tell them what they can do with the property. Then that gives them 60 days closing date to get through some of the minutia with the city and government to get ready. So they're not paying out a bunch of money to contractors until they've gotten some of the other things underway, permitting, all of those. But once feasibility is done, their time period is done. I highly recommend when you use this box, you also use Form 35F, feasibility study. It has some more information about feasibility information in there. Have the time periods run the same. That's completely fine. Feasibility Form 35F has a box you can check that says that it automatically waives unless otherwise approved. So that would be the difference there. Yes.
Question. There is currently a property that's listed in vacant land, but it actually has a house on it.
Got it.
It's an estate. So
I would double list that.
Okay.
Single family and vacant land.
okay, but then if a buyer is wanting to purchase,
And they can write it up on either contract.
even though,
If the house is on there,
yeah, okay.
and at that point, then I would just do
Would
a
it be
form.
better to do it on, like, from the buyer's standpoint, like if I'm representing the buyer, would it be better to use 21 or?
It doesn't matter. If I were more concerned and I need to do some more research about the property itself, I'm going to bypass the 35 in a 20 with a 21 resident. I would use residential purchase sale agreement. I will not use Form 35 inspection contingency. I will use 35F feasibility. Feasibility can be used with a 21. That doesn't matter. And I apologize if I throw too many numbers out there. These numbers have not changed in 30 years for most of these. So I just happen to know what they are. With that being said, listing brokers, the feasibility contingency Form 35F allows soil testing. 35 inspection contingency form does not. So listing brokers, if I'm going to just, for listing purposes, if a 35F is used and soil testing is done and that buyer discloses they found contaminated soil, which is very common to have oil tanks here in Seattle, the contamination runs with the lifetime of the person who currently owns the house. So I own the house today. Tanya says, oh, Genine, I'm so sorry. We found contaminated soil, blah, 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 blah. It's now disclosed to the government. Now, all cleanup is on my shoulders until I die. So if they can't clean it up within a year, 5 years comes down the road, oh, we have an issue again. Genine, you owe us more money.
Wow.
So we as sellers never want to know about contaminated soil. So you want to grab the language from the 35 and put it in the 35F to protect your seller. Always go back to a form that gives you protection and grab pieces as needed. These are written by attorneys. We are more than welcome to go and take verbatim and put it someplace else. Okay, that's totally fine. Okay, that gives us 28 as our last purchase and sale form, condominium. So this is going to have some other nuances. The top is going to be the same. We're going to get all the way down to line 15 or specific term 15 and 16. Those are items that are not on a 21, a 23, or 25. They talk about a public offering statement or resale certificate. Buyer brokers. When we say, seller, you need to deliver the resale certificate to us, and we put check delivery to buyer and we put 5 days, you have now violated the RCW. We are required to give the seller 10 days, not business days, but 10 days to supply that to us. That is the requirement of the state. We then have 5 days to review it, which is part of the boilerplate of this contract. If you currently have it because it was in supplements, you could check the box received and then you put the date you received it. Be very, very careful. Those 5 days that we get to review those as buyers start the minute we receive this document. Well, most documents, well, how could I have received it if I don't have mutual? How do I start a time period? Well, this one, if you put a date, your 5 days starts ticking before you reach mutual. If it takes you 4 days for counter offers to reach mutual, you have 1 day left for that contingency. So this is my recommendation to anybody. Never let the seller know you have Form 17. Never let the seller know you have the resale certificate. Make them physically deliver it to your email box. Because it's in supplements does not constitute delivery. But the minute you grab it and you say, hey, Tanya, my buyer has a question on Form 17, page 2, line blah. She's like, that's a great question, Genine. Can you email that to me and I will forward that to my seller so they can answer because I cannot answer on their behalf. And what she has just done is documented it. I verbally called her. She is now changing it so it's in writing. So it's documented that I have said my buyer has received Form 17, even though we've not signed one. Form 17 never has to be signed legally. What we have to do as seller representation is we have to physically deliver it to the buyer side. And that's going to be via email to the buyer broker and their firm. And of course, we're going to send it to our firm because that's how we document everything. Once it's documented that it's been delivered, buyer's right for the bite at the apple is just the 3 days after receipt. For day 4, if there's something wrong with Form 17, it's all complete. They've got nothing they can come back at us. Then their opportunity to walk away from the contract is gone, because I can prove that it was emailed to them. So if they never sign a copy of it, you listing broker for command reasons in your opportunity, take that email, do a print icon, download it to a PDF and put it in Form 17 where they would normally sign it as showing delivery. That is, oh, and then condominium assessments. This is not like an assessment like we talk about up here where specific term 13, charge and assessments levied. This assessment is what we call the monthly HOA. So how much is it per month? And do they want to do a deposit of 1 month, 2 months? Sometimes the lender will require it. Sometimes the HOA will require that the buyer pay the first month and a deposit as their buy-in to the association, which helps build up the reserve. So you will need to know that before you fill in these blanks. And if not, the listing broker should come back and fill those blanks in. And if not, then the listing agent has not done their job because they didn't tell you what you needed to do, right? And then here is where compensation moved down to now specific terms 19 versus 18 versus 17. So again, it's always going to say buyer brokerage compensation. You should never fill this out and they're a blank here. Otherwise, your buyer, that means your buyer's paying you or you're not getting paid, one of the two. So if you failed to fill this in because the buyer told you to, which by filling out a buyer broker service agreement, your buyer is telling you, hey, broker, ask the seller to pay my fees so I don't have to. So if we don't fill it out, we would be found negligent. And I doubt the buyer is going to pay our fee. When this first rolled out a couple of years ago, we saw many blanks here. I think my biggest one I saw that the buyer broker didn't get paid was $150,000. It's really hard to swallow, especially since they've been, working with this client for umpteen months, years, or what have you. So there are all the differences of the purchase and sale agreement. I am offering a class on other addendums to use this month as well, but there are the differences on what you need, your job is. So in the state of Washington, in 1986, Coultage versus Heritage House, the Supreme Court said, okay, you as a licensed broker can practice this much law, a little itty tiny bit. That means that we are given the right to pick a form. That means we're practicing law the minute we pick a form. So we have to pick the correct form. We're allowed to fill out the form as long as it was written by attorneys and it's approved by the state. Okay, we can do that. That's again, practicing law. Just filling in the blanks gives us, or we're practicing that much law. When we start writing Form 34s, which is a blank addendum, that one could get us malpracticely sued. So we got to be careful with that. But just know that those are some of the things that now we're held to the standard and care of an attorney by picking the correct form and filling in the blanks. So do it correctly. The example I gave at the sales meeting yesterday, not 22K not filled out. I, as a buyer broker, didn't fill it out. My buyer now has a $3,000 bill. I'm now writing a check to the utility company on behalf of my buyer because I didn't do my job. I failed to do my job. So, any questions? Hopefully I helped answer most of your questions that you guys have been dying to know for the rest of the afternoon. But again, do some due diligence on your part and know these forms so that you don't get caught trying to figure something out at 11 o'clock at night. Janine's not answering her phone. Oh, because she's in bed and asleep because she wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So knowing a little bit more information every time, and feel free to practice writing contracts. Write them, email them to me. Ping me, say, hey, Genine, will you redline this for me? Please tell me it's not urgent. If it's urgent, please tell me it's urgent so that if you need it for a true client, then I've got, I stuff on it and I'm taking care of it for you immediately. But yeah, so please always utilize me. Go to your coaches. Feel free to go to other brokers, but remember, other brokers that have been pricing for years have some habits that probably are not my favorite. I'm not going to say they're bad. Just going to say they're not my favorite. So that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much.
Janine, I have question one for you.
Yes,
Yeah, this is Daniel.
I
In
know.
case if I need you or Summit are you available on Saturdays?
Am I available on Saturdays?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. Just to make sure. Yeah. Thank
I
you.
am. I will tell you this. I do a lot of wine tastings on the weekends with friends. I belong to 10 wine clubs. So if I have been drinking, I may not answer my phone. So I
Okay.
do
Thank
not
you,
want to give you
Janine.
wrong information that I don't remember what I gave you or yeah. So just know that to be true.
Okay. Thank you, Janine.
All right, guys, have a great rest of the day. We'll chat soon.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.